like it really, is when you take something that was meant to be impossible and it becomes possible. When we used to operate on very small babies, and you used to get a liver rupture, which you would often get because they were getting fluid resuscitated aggressively, the liver capsule would get very tense and then it would rip. Then it would bleed, and there's nothing you could do about it.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Squeezing the Juice, the Applied XR podcast from Juice Immersive. This week it's my great pleasure to introduce to the show Professor Iain Hennessey. Iain is emergency paediatric surgeon at Alder Hey Children's Hospital, the founder of the world-leading Alder Hey Innovation Hub, and clinical director of innovation there now for over a decade. He's also an honorary professor at University of Liverpool, a keynote speaker and a futurist. Iain, massive welcome to Squeezing the Juice.
Hello there.
How do we find you today, and where do we find you today?
So currently I'm sat in one of our booths, but in the background you can probably see our Innovation Hub, which is our 1,000 square metre tech development area that's built deep underneath Alder Hey Children's Hospital. AKA
the Bat Cave, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Good stuff. So first of all, and we will very quickly get to the Innovation Hub, of course, but could you just tell us a little bit about Alder Hey as a children's hospital, because not everyone watching and listening may be familiar with Alder Hey and what it is that happens there, and then just a bit about your role, if that's okay, and what you do in your time working for Alder Hey.
Cool. So Alder Hey Children's Hospital, if you've not seen it, it's incredibly cool. It's a very beautiful hospital. It was built in 2015. The original Alder Hey, though, is over 100 years old, built on the old Victorian poorhouse type model. So it built up a really big history for being a world-leading children's hospital. Then we moved into this new state-of-the-art facility. And what they've really tried to achieve with this is to make it more about health than illness. So it's built into parkland, and what it does is it actually integrates into the park itself. So it's really beautiful. It's a really gorgeous hospital. It's been designed to be warm and inviting so that when the children come in, there's big tree houses and mobiles and cool art, and it's been optimized to be friendly, but it's also incredibly capable. We are a major trauma centre. I'm a trauma surgeon. We will take patients from a 6 million catchment area and do, at the highest levels of emergency surgery on them, cardiac centres. If you want it, you've got it here. It goes from primary to quaternary level care. And really crucially, we also, I talk about primary care, if you fall over and graze your knee, we look after you right up to the high level stuff, which is the cardiac surgery and neonatal surgery. So it's really ingrained into history, it's ingrained into the community, it's very capable, and it's hugely technologically optimized. It's one of the most advanced kids hospitals in the world, and the Innovation Hub is part of how we stay at the cutting edge.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, I can personally vouch for the amazing place that Alder Hey is. A number of times I've taken our little girl there over her early years. But in terms of innovation at Alder Hey, so congratulations. I think recently it was 10 years that you've been clinical director of innovation there. Can you think back to pre-Innovation Hub days? What was innovation like in healthcare generally back then, and certainly before the hub became the place that it now is?
So Alder Hey has always been an innovative place. Well, lots of world firsts happened. They were the first place to test penicillin on a child, for instance. A lot of the cardiac surgeries were developed here. So it does have a proud history of it, but it wasn't systemized. It wasn't like a thing, it wasn't like a service. And it was really in the build-up to the move to the new hospital that it started to become more of an organised function of the hospital to go, right, okay, how do we identify new things or fresh ways of doing things, implement them, and then achieve value off the back of it? And the Innovation Hub actually jumped out of the design of the new hospital. So we took over an old long-term ventilation unit in the old hospital, which was being mothballed, and we filled it with mock-ups of what the new hospital was going to be like, and we just inserted the technology into it that we were trying out to see what would work, what would not work. And we found that this was actually incredibly valuable to the companies. They really liked this. And they also liked having somebody they could come and speak to, me, who kind of spoke conversational technology and business. And that started to attract companies to come and co-locate with us and to work with us. So we created this zone which was friendly to clinicians, friendly to patients, and friendly to companies and engineers and scientists. And that's when we really started to see it catalyzing. And that's what we built on and have iterated on ever since then. A neutral space within the hospital, which allows the mixing of ideas and problems, potential solutions to, make a difference.
I love the fact that the very kind of bricks and mortar of the Innovation Hub was in itself an innovative use of something that was otherwise set for mothball.
Yeah, so in the old hospital, it was just empty. And in fact, I had a little tussle with the cleaners over it because the cleaners wanted to use it as their base, and I was like, and I just slowly annexed more and more of of the long-term ventilation unit until I had all of it. I was just slowly creeping out. If I'd had my way, I would have just kept on going in the old place, but then we demolished it. So, but then but this place here, the new Innovation Hub, was equally nicked.
Where was this one nicked from?
So this was meant to be air handling units down here. So 1,000 square meters meant to be air handling units, and then they didn't need the air handling units down here. So we had 1,000 square meters of spare space in the hospital, but we didn't need it for anything clinical. And they were going to brick it up because the way private finance initiative works is you pay per square meter of hospital. So having 1,000 square meters of dead space meant, so they had to put it beyond use. So I was like, I'll have it. Looks like the Batcave. There was literally nothing in here. It was like there was earth that was slightly flooded. There was no power, no water, nothing. And we got some money to pull in the power and water and put in a very basic, still concrete. Might be able to show you. Still concrete floor. You can see, the reason that the ceilings are open is not because it was a cool architectural feature, is because we didn't have enough money to put a ceiling in. So we took this 1,000 square meters of space and turned it into an innovation hub.
The unfinished look is a good vibe. I like it, and and I think again, it's on a serious note, the environment within which innovation takes place needs certain characteristics. And obviously I've been to the new hub a number of times. I was there just yesterday, and what strikes me is that it's now really a place of acknowledged value within the wider organisation. You've kind of, I guess, bridged quite a few gaps perhaps over the time it's been in existence, and you've now kind of got other departments almost using it as a place of work as well. So tell me a bit about that in terms of how the Innovation Hub interacts with the wider Alder Hey Hospital.
So we've made a lot of mistakes over the years and learned from them about what works and what doesn't work, and more of the what doesn't work. And a problem I find with innovation is you find a problem, you create a really cool new solution, and then you go, right, okay, want to pilot it, and we get into the hospital. Now, a number of different things happens. Either you do all the work, and then everyone's like, well, I don't want to take this on because you're currently doing all the work for us, so why would I do all the work? And you're currently paying for it, so why would I pay for it? And then you absorb too much of your innovation efforts into delivery. And then it fails because you can't support it anymore because you're not big enough. So that bat and pass of holding on to it too hard is a problem. And equally, if you go up to the department and say, look, here's a great idea, chuck it at them and leave, then it just dies as well. So chucking the baton at them too soon. So we've got the transformation team down here and the digital team, representatives of it, not the whole one, just a few of them. Then that allows for a more efficient baton pass so that you're not holding on to it for too long and therefore getting dragged into an area which you should not be dragged into. Equally, you're not just dropping something on someone's doorstep and expecting them to use it. You kind of ease it in. And that's why it's really important to have people in the same space from an implementation point of view. I mean, the co-location works in lots of different aspects, from discovering problems to better design to, pulling in people who are not normally in a hospital environment, to allow the right mixing for ideation. But from an implementation point of view, having the different arms of the hospital involved in implementation within, oh, could you have a look at this distance is really, really, really powerful.
Great stuff. Yeah, I think that coexistence of innovation with business as usual, as a lot of our enterprise clients would call it, is it's improving in a lot of settings. I think we've certainly been in situations ourselves working with clients who are innovating, but there is still that valley of death between what you create and its real world adoption and application. So just to rewind to that point you made about problem identification, is that always the lead in terms of how you guys innovate?
Not always, but it's a good one. I think if you're going to go for one, it's probably, if you only had to do one, I think get a nice big selection of problems is the way forward. I'd love to say we're completely problem focused and we always start with a problem, but occasionally we do get a solution coming in and go, oh, that we reckon that's brilliant for this. But the ability to find a problem and articulate that problem is really valuable. And what's great is that we have so many problems. We've literally got a hospital full of problems that it's very cheap because it's like gold out there, but just lying around at surface level.
No, absolutely, and I think there's a real excitement when you're in that space of matching innovation or co-design with a real world problem that has been brought to you and presented to you. Tell me a bit about maybe some of the earlier examples. Like, is there an early flagship example of a piece of innovation, a solution, a product that came through the hub and is now out there in the world saving lives?
That worked or didn't work? Or you want one that worked? Right, I'll give you one that worked.
Go on,
I'll give you one that worked. I'll give you one that worked. Loads that didn't work, but I'll give you one that worked. So when we first started, and this is a really early project, this is back in about 2014, we were working with a big company on virtual reality. And virtual reality wasn't very good, but it was still very early doors. And I was like, I don't think this is the way forward. I reckon, I've been looking at this 3D printing thing. I reckon you could 3D print this and it'd be better because you'd get a bit more of a tactile feel for it. And the big company went, oh, okay then. And they brought in a small company that didn't have any experience of doing medical things, but they did have experience of doing 3D printing. And then we worked with them to create preoperative planning models. And eventually these preoperative planning models got so advanced that we used it to plan a tumour resection procedure where we didn't think that the child would survive. In fact, the national board had said, you can't do this operation, it's impossible. But the surgeon used the 3D print to build a coalition of surgeons who were willing to take it on. And she survived, and she's called Leah, and her family are more than happy for us to talk about it, to try and promote this work, because this is good, 6-7 years now. Dad's written a beautiful book about it, about the removal of this impossible tumour and the effects that it's had. And that's one story out of the now, I think, 850 complex 3D print projects which have come out of that, which at the time was a complete punt. And it was totally new. And it was a new model as well. It was about putting the engine, at the time, if you wanted to 3D print something, you normally had to send it off to the company. Whereas they put the engineers in the hospital and they actually sat in the MDT meetings and sat beside the surgeons when they were planning how to build these things. And that model is now spread to 6 other hospitals around the UK and to the US as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, your colleagues Gemma and Lois were telling me about a bit about Leah's story yesterday, and I think that is such a powerful example, isn't it? Of, well, a that coalition of the willing and those surgeons being up for that level of challenge, and then the sort of beautiful adoption of technology to help them achieve it. What's that like for you and your colleagues when you're able to achieve something that perhaps others said couldn't be done?
I mean, there's nothing like it really. It's when you take something that was meant to be impossible and it becomes possible. It's just, it's like, oh, look at that. I mean, I can think of all sorts of different examples. I mean, I remember when we used to operate on very small babies, and you used to get a liver rupture, which you would often get because they were getting fluid resuscitated aggressively. The liver capsule would get very tense and then it would rip. Then it would bleed and there's nothing you could do about it. And they would just die in front of you. But now you have these special tissue sealants, which have come from the military. You just hose it on, stops bleeding. And I chuckle a little bit every time I use it because I remember what it was like when that was game over. And now you just go, takes no skill. You just, the trainees don't understand why I find this stuff so amazing, but I still do. It's like, look at that. That was previously totally impossible. Now, easy. And this is the story over and over again in medicine. You know, it wasn't long ago that if you got leukemia, you were 100% going to die. There was no treatment for it. And now they're like, well, 90% of the time they survive. Taking things which were previously horrifically difficult. I mean, we're now looking after babies that are born at 21 weeks. That's 19 weeks early. It's like 4 months early, halfway, half made. They're coming out and surviving. And that's the advancement of technology. And it's amazing to watch it.
Absolutely incredible. So in terms of the attitude towards new technology, have you seen that change over time as well? Because, I think it's fair to say we all in our work come up against barriers sometimes, and maybe they're cultural, maybe they're individual, but what's it like now in your world, Iain, in terms of people's willingness to embrace new tech and innovations in paediatric healthcare?
So it changes over time. And I can think of, two big acceleration points in health tech adoption. And those two acceleration points were when we moved into the new hospital and COVID. And what you need for these to happen is you need a lot of disruption. So moving to the new hospital, obviously, the fact we're going to demolish our old hospital and move into a completely new building and have to remake everything. And COVID, where it's all of a sudden, you might die. There's a very different setup within the hospital from that point of view, but required a lot of things to be fractured and a lot of things to be changed and a real-time urgency to do it. Same with moving to new buildings. Like, we are moving in October 2015. So it has got, it doesn't matter. Is this happening? You just got to do it. So you've got these two periods of very intense innovation. And then in between, you have varying levels. I actually feel that at the moment it's solidifying, becoming really quite difficult because of cost pressures and because maybe a bit of fatigue after COVID. We did an awful lot during the COVID pandemic, and you often get a bounce back against it. So I found that over time, there have been a lot of changes in the appetite for change and the drivers for it.
Yeah, I'll come on to COVID actually in terms of what types of innovations perhaps had inspired. But just to circle back around to, you mentioned early VR then, before we moved into the 3D printing kind of use cases. So what's the relationship been like in that period since now with virtual reality as VR has matured and advanced and developed, as have obviously the other forms of extended reality in AR and mixed as well? Can you give us a bit of a sort of a timeline of what the relationship has been like with those suites of technologies?
The way I like to think about technologies is the ones which we're going to use and the ones which we are hovering around. We've been hovering around VR for a very long time, positioning, making sure that when that killer platform drops, we'll be ready to utilize it, from a point of view of people being used to thinking about things in new dimensional ways, to what would it take to get it into the hospital, etc. So with virtual reality, we've been, even the first Oculus headset, we were experimenting with, creating three-dimensional reconstructions of anatomy, making sure that we had the right governance in place to move it from DICOM files into a VR environment, making our own VR environments, experimenting with the first HoloLens when it came out, second HoloLens when it came out. We've got all the different headsets, Vision Pro, etc. Just trying it out and going, right, is it there yet? I've still not had the VR headset when I'm like, okay, this is not going to come off people's heads. The Vision Pro is probably about the closest if it wasn't so heavy. But you can just see the potential for when this sort of technology really drops, about the fact that you can just remake anything in front of you that you want to. So it's been fascinating to watch over the years, and we've had loads of different projects, but all in, I would say, a relatively small scale. I've not had like for instance, at the moment we have a very large AI deployment, which is just business as usual, touching everybody, being used as a clinical tool, like ambient scribing, AI coding, all these different things. It's just like in the firmament of how the hospital runs. Whereas the virtual reality is still in the, patient distraction space, but not on a massive scale. Visualization of anatomy for some niche procedures and high-end procedures, explaining anatomy to patients. So it's got a bit, but it's not yet. This is a fundamental technology which is running through everything that we do in the hospital. A lot of simulation as well. I find it a really interesting space that I'm watching really closely.
Very good, very good. So, yeah, I remember I think it was one of your earlier projects was a collaboration with the Virtual Engineering Centre, and that was, again, probably experimenting with VR from the point of view of preoperative heart surgery and being able to kind of rehearse and practice and plan. Tell us a bit about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, that was back in 2016, I think. We did the first play with the VR heart, and actually in one of the rooms over there, we set up our virtual engineering centre. Now, that room is still called the Virtual Engineering Centre. Like, even though we haven't used it for virtual engineering for quite some time, it's just funny how things stick. But at the time, you had to have about, I think it was like 12 or 15 lighthouses all rigged up on the ceiling. The headset was wired. We had a huge workstation, to do the graphics behind it. And we could create these, hearts the size of cars that you could walk around inside from the point of view of trying to get your head around an operation. And I remember standing inside a heart with one of our cardiac surgeons, and our VR headsets were designed to be torches. And we were, almost like you're inspecting under, the inside of a cave or something like that. We're flashing around. Like, what's that? It's like, and then like, how big is this? And it was really fascinating because it was just a different way of conceptualizing it. Because up until then, you would just get a pad and paper out and you'd do a lot of drawing or be looking at it in 2 dimensions on a screen. And then, as time moved on, you saw the platforms evolving so that you could manipulate the images a lot better. You start to create your own custom cross sections of it, and now even you can take them and animate them. I mean, it's incredible. Some of the new VR platforms, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, how did they get the fact that the glossiness of that looks like how glossy a heart is? It's just mind blowing. And you can strip away the different layers, look at the electrical activity, look at the blood flow, look how it works. I mean, it must be so easy to be a medical student these days.
Are you regretful there as to when you were studying?
Yeah, because we used to have to like cut up dead bodies, and like they didn't look anything like it does in real life, and plastic models and things which, I don't know, were very uniform and standard as opposed to what is normally incredibly varied, and not able to see something in real life, or at least as close to a simulacra of real life. So it's fascinating how the technology's changed, but yet still in VR, not a big part of the workflow, not business as usual, still used for more niche cases. And when you look at what is possible within these current platforms. You know that when the tipping point happens, it's all going to go very quickly. And that tipping point is just how comfortable the headsets are, I think now. I think the resolution and, the fact you don't have to have lighthouses and all the rest of it, it's just, they make these things comfier and smaller, and all of a sudden people are not going to take them off.
Yeah. So for you, it's a hardware handbrake that's if anything stalling that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is interesting because people will engage with it, but not for huge lengths of time. And that's what. And although they got a lot better from the nausea point of view, I used to have to max at about 40 minutes on a VR headset, and now I can wear them for a lot longer. They seem to be much better from that point of view, but still some people are quite sensitive to it, so it's
very good. I'm going to bring us back to the heart, actually, and just want to talk about one of my favourite current innovations of yours, Little Hearts at Home. But before we do, the COVID pandemic, can you just sort of cast your mind back to some of those changes and innovations in the way you did things that were completely forced and accelerated by COVID?
We had so many. That's what I loved about it. I mean, in the room that's next door to here, we've got a thing called the Rapid Prototyping Centre, which is where we make prototypes things. And we did a lot of PPE at the time and a lot of adaptations to make our environment safer. And we made 54 prototypes, of which 12 we deployed to care and 4 we commercialised within 1 year. Now, there's no way you could do that now. The sheer pace of change at the time was incredible. We had got so many different examples from the COVID period and it was interesting that I remember at the time I had proposed that we could use Teams as a means of communication. This is about 3 or 4 weeks before we started to get word from it, and it got chucked out. And it was like, oh, there's all sorts of security problems. What if the wife of someone who works here knows the passcode of the person? They could technically look at it, and all sorts of things like that. And it got chucked out. And then COVID happened, and then it was like, yeah, do it. And it was just like that. We're like, okay, boop.
Abandon caution.
Yeah. Yeah, just do it. And it was like, and we just did it, and it just like took off like that. It was, and we've got it's like looking at one of these logarithmic charts of usage, and it's not like everybody was using it, and it was incredibly useful. And same with product development, we got something through medical device regulations in under 18 months. And normally, your average time to get something from concept to deployment in medicine is 7 years. And then, like essentially amateurs, we're not a company at the end of the day. We're getting medical devices out to the market within 18 months because there was a case of we want it now, here's the money. And regulations were like, what can we do to help you? It's like, we want to make this work. How can we help you with this? So it was a very, forgiving time for me. And what was interesting is it's the same people and the same problems in the same environment, and actually not a really huge amount of difference in the amount of resources. It's more a case of do it now. Here's a small amount of money. We're willing to take the risk. Go. I loved it, which is terrible. For innovation, it was great, but obviously worldwide pandemics are bad. But from a point of view of that burning platform, that there's urgency, that here are some completely novel problems. So problems that you've never had before, which allows multiple different ways of solving them. And because that niche hasn't been narrowed down by competition, lots of people competing in the space, that it's almost like you can't miss. There's a new problem, there's 6 ways to fix it. They all work, and you just go. You're not trying to find like a crack or a small thing. It's just like, amazing.
Awesome. Yeah, don't worry, we won't make the episode headline quote. I loved COVID.
Yes,
Professor Iain Hennessey.
I know.
But just sticking with it, was there anything during that time that was innovated to sort of support with that reduction in the number of people in physical spaces, with kind of bringing remote expertise to the surgical theatre, for example? Is anything around that that you recall?
Actually, we've got one just there. You might be able to see it. I don't know if you can see that robot that's behind me.
I
In the
can. I
screen
can.
there. Yeah. So one of the problems we had was we provide neonatal surgical services, and we often go down to women's hospital to look at newborn babies who've got problems with their abdomen. They may need an operation, and because we're trying to limit the amount of people moving between hospitals, and a lot of people were shielding at home as well and couldn't work in the hospital, but we wanted to still use their expertise. We put in a chain of telemedicine robots in our hospital, around the region actually, so that we could dial in and just look, at and with high resolution cameras, 40 times zoom, secure, encrypted, data transfer. And I mean, some of these robots are crazy. That's actually not the most advanced. The most advanced one used to have one which had my head on it, another arm that had effectively my eyes on it. So I could control the head. I could look at people with the head. So you could control the room. So you could, people knew you were talking to them because I had rotated the screen to look at them. And then on the gantry arm, I was looking at the baby. So I could get so I had a zoomed out view and I had a focused in view. And it meant that if someone wanted an opinion, I could just give them an opinion immediately. I could just log in, pull it up, and I could chat to people, chat to family. That was fantastic. And that we had been looking at before the pandemic. So we had the plans in place. So we just had to activate it. And off we went and just implementing the neonatal telemedicine service.
That's just amazing. Does that sort of innovation then stick kind of once the situation is moved on? Like, do we still utilize that type of technology now in peacetime?
Sadly not. Sadly not. So people prefer me to come down and have a look, and because a human presence is more reassuring than a robotic presence. Well, but I mean, the downside to that is it takes me 30, 40 minutes to get there as opposed to being instantaneous. And actually, the resolution of the camera really was spectacular, fantastic. But people do revert. So, you have these periods of intense innovation, but there are really long and traditional established ways of working. So I find now that when beforehand I may have used a telemedicine robot, people would now prefer me to come down and have a look at it. Now, that said, we're about to get around to actually building a new neonatal intensive care unit on site, so we won't have to travel, which would be great. But I think it's an interesting study in human attitudes to technology and how they adopt things and how they use things and what drives them to keep on using it. What is the perceived benefit and value of it? And, because at one point we were doing almost exclusively telemedicine clinics. And now there are some people who've gone back completely only to face-to-face. And I find that I fight to keep my telemedicine clinics. I like them, because I think there's a lot of patients who don't have to come to the hospital. But whenever you have a big change, you almost get that rebound effect. And I've watched this over the years, these periods of acceleration and deceleration, acceleration, deceleration, step forward, step back. I mean, the like stock market. I mean, it rises, but it's a bit of a roller coaster.
Isn't it just amazing? Am I right in recalling that you have worked with mixed reality, HoloLens, etc., in an operative capacity, even experimentally?
So we've used simulated setups for it. And actually, during the pandemic, they used the HoloLens during theatre as well, a lot for its remote presence point of view. And they're still using, and I'll have to check exactly, still using the HoloLens 2 headset for giving people tours of the hospital. Okay. If you don't want to come in. It was the specialist nurses that were using that because we had a load of the HoloLens headsets. And we've got some nice footage as well using mixed reality in theatre so that we can put the scans up and have, the notes up at the same time. The advantage of this being that because we can't touch anything when we're scrubbed, you can manipulate things just by gesture. The downsides to it is the lights in theatre are a nightmare, because they're so powerful and bright, for taking out the image, because if you get a load of light in it, and again, weight. Our operating glasses that we wear to magnify are 30 grams, and even that's heavy if you're wearing it for 8 hours. So, wearing the headset for really long, extended periods of times is difficult. But we have used them in the cardiac team have used them in the theatre.
Yeah, I think in my mind's eye it was the use case you've just described there of the notes being up in the field of view.
That was Raphael's project. Yeah, he did a great job of that.
And I think that but what you land on there in that explanation is really critical, which is that for some people who are perhaps in our world, the XR space, or just generally in emerging tech and innovation, unless you truly understand the world of the people you're innovating for, your chance of success and having that real world impact are lessened, because to some people they wouldn't think about the fact that you guys might be scrubbed up working in an operating theatre for 8 hours at a time, and therefore completely miss some of those really physical human needs that you would have for any new technology to be adopted.
Oh yeah, what you put in your head weight-wise is incredibly important, because, just like to give you an example, when we're operating, the baby's down here, so your head has to go over. For every couple of degrees your head goes over, the amount of pressure you apply on your neck really, because the head's quite a heavy thing. If you add more weight to the front, it makes a really big difference, the amount of weight on your neck. And the number one cause for early retirement for surgeons is neck pain. And it's because of a bad ergonomic posture. So if you whack a big heavy thing on the front, it's going to really, really hit your neck.
And is that the sort of thing that, because obviously I know a fair bit about how the hub works in terms of its engagement with private sector partners and innovation companies. Is that a big part of it, is opening up the clinical world to those innovators and helping them understand not just what the source problem might be, but actually some of those nuances of your world?
Oh, yeah. I remember once we did some consultancy for a big company that shall remain nameless, and they had some wristbound tech for doctors, which they'd developed in the States, and they wanted to implement in the UK. And we gave them the very unfortunate news that we're not allowed to wear watches in the ward, so, which is different from the States. And it's like, oh, you can't use this. Like, no, we can't use this. So it's like, yeah.
It's about asking the right question very, very early on, isn't it? And our former prime ministers have fallen foul of that rule on camera, I believe, too. Amazing. So we'll bring it to a wrap shortly, I think, Iain. But it's brilliant conversation, and I could talk all day about the interplay between innovation and technology and the world of paediatrics. So, just looking to the future, what type of technology or particular innovation, it's up to you how narrow you might choose to go, are you really, really excited about, or you and your team are really, really excited about currently in 2025?
So the things which I look at are the things which make humans more human, and optimizes what we're meant to be doing and what we enjoy doing and what we're good at doing. We need to line up the values and abilities that we have with what we are doing. Humans are rubbish at data entry. Right? It's not a human job. I don't think we should be doing it. So I think once you hit these type of things, you almost always get value off the back of it, because you get people to be doing things closer to what their purpose is, what their use is, be that AI, be it visualization of data. It could be, just labor-saving type devices, or things which make a repetitive task easier in theatre, like suturing is a pain. How can you create automated systems for doing this? How do you just make things easier and reduce the cognitive load and make things more enjoyable as well. That's the primary purpose of us is to be happy, I think. And that these type of technologies are ones which always kind of go, I think that there'll be something in that.
And that's why co-design and collaboration with the human end user is just so vital. Amazing. Thank you so much. I just wanted to quickly, bring us to Little Hearts at Home, just because I read about this recently and heard a bit more about it yesterday on my visit. Just tell us about that project, because that seems to be something that is on the precipice of being completely game-changing.
Yeah, so again, I'll tell you about Little Hearts at Home, and I'll tell you why I like it, and other things which I find frustrating. So the concept behind Little Hearts at Home is that we do some really high-end children's heart operations, and they tend to get done in stages. And the child in between the stages, it would be great if they could go home. But because we're worried that we won't be able to monitor them, that there's if there's a problem, you will keep them in the hospital. And that is incredibly expensive, because you're having the cost of looking after them in the hospital, and two, you're not doing something with that bed. The opportunity cost is large. So the platform that we've created, Little Hearts at Home, essentially allows a child to go home, but means we still have sight of how they're doing, how they're feeding, what their oxygen saturations are like. And then you can monitor this over time, and if they're starting to deteriorate, you can bring them in for their operation sooner, or bring them up to the hospital and avoid an emergency admission. And it allows you to utilise your resources better, because if you've got less people just sitting killing time in beds, you're doing the operation and the person who needs to be doing the operation next, and you have this whole dashboard type view of the situation. And you get children to be at home, which is where they're meant to be, with their families, so they can enjoy Christmas, and the parents aren't having to travel from northern Wales or Isle of Man to be in our hospital. So it's the sort of thing that makes complete moral sense. This is a good thing to do, and it makes complete financial sense, because it saves money, and we've got all sorts of data, so it saves money. So why is it so difficult? It's like, why is it that it just feels so hard to convince people that it's like, in other hospitals, or people that we're trying to get out to, or even with their own hospitals, like, we should do this, and we should do it for other patients as well, and we should do it. It's just very, very hard to get that change in mindset of going, no, we're now not going to look after them in hospital, we're going to look after them in the community, we're going to move this care out. I mean, it's one of the national priorities. They want prevention of problems, they want adoption of digital, and they want care closer to home. 3 key principles of NHS strategy. So why is it that not every single hospital in the country has Little Hearts at Home? That's my frustration behind the whole thing, because it makes sense and it's the right thing to do. But yeah, there we go. That's the story of innovation's life.
Absolutely, but we keep going, and part of my close really is just to say, keep up the fantastic work, keep fighting the good fight, and ultimately, just keep helping your industry and your world open and be embracing of these types of tech, because ultimately I think if we're all honest with each other, when we look back and then look ahead, we know that technologies like the ones discussed today are going to feature very, very heavily in how we care for people in the future. Thank you for everything you guys do. Like I say, keep up the work. Hopefully there'll be opportunities in the future for companies like ourselves in our industry to really impress upon paediatric healthcare and make the future brighter for our young people. So very much looking forward to exploring those opportunities with you and your team, Iain.
Excellent.
Thank you for today. Really, really appreciate it. And absolutely. That's been Squeezing the Juice with Professor Iain Hennessey from Alder Hey Innovation Hub. Thank you for your time, Iain. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Squeezing the Juice wherever you tuned in. If you haven't already, please do give us a thumbs up or a like or a positive review. It really helps as we try and grow the show. And also, if you subscribe, you'll never miss an episode. Indeed, if this was your first episode, please do go back into the library and watch some of our previous eps with really inspiring guests from the world of extended reality. Until next time.